What do you do when the man you trust, the one who signs your paychecks, compliments your work, and smiles like he's known your family forever, closes the door behind you at your child's birthday party? I remember the soft thud of the door, how it clicked like a secret snapping shut. Moments earlier, everything was laughter and cake, bubbles floating in the backyard, my 1-year-old clapping her frosting-covered hands. My husband was just outside with the guests. The house smelled of cinnamon candles and vanilla icing. There was no reason, none at all, for me to feel afraid. But the second Jared stepped into that room with me, I felt it, the shift, the silence, the wrongness. He was my boss. He'd come to our home with a gift in one hand and an easy grin on his face. But now, he stood too close. His voice was low. Too low. And his eyes, they weren't friendly anymore. They were hungry. In that instant, I felt like I'd been dragged into a script I didn't audition for. One written by someone who expected silence, complicity, a smile. I didn't know then that this moment, this single, quiet violation, would unravel my marriage, reshape my view of trust, and force me to confront a truth I never wanted to face. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from people you once invited into your home that I used to think my life was small in the best possible way. Predictable. Cozy. The kind of life you build brick by brick. Job, marriage, baby, weekends at the park, grocery lists with scribbled hearts in the margins. We lived in a sunlit, 2-story colonial just outside of New Haven. The shutters were faded blue, the backyard shaded by a tired oak tree that dropped acorns like confetti. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I'm Claire. 31. Freelance content writer, mother, wife. Somewhere along the line, I started introducing myself in that order. Before Emma was born, I worked full-time in educational publishing, dull, steady, reliable. I edited textbooks, managed deadlines, and craved the smell of fresh office paper like it was perfume. I met Joseph during an author conference in Boston. He was charming in a modest kind of way, hands callous from work, a quiet laugh, eyes that softened when he looked at me. He built things. Foundations, decks, tiny dollhouses for Emma. It was comforting, dating someone who measured twice and cut once. We married in the fall. Maple leaves. Warm cider. A small reception under a white tent with borrowed fairy lights. A year later, Emma came along and everything shifted. Not in a bad way, just a narrowing of focus. Life became a cycle of feedings, diaper changes, lullabies. I scaled back on work, took freelance gigs here and there to keep my brain alive. That's how I met Jared. He was the executive director of the nonprofit that had picked up one of my blog articles on early childhood learning. He emailed me a compliment, called it thought-provoking but gentle, which felt oddly intimate. He wanted more pieces like it. We started working together, slowly at first. I wrote articles, he edited lightly and always added a personal comment or two. Over time, our email threads turned from strictly professional to casual. He asked about my daughter, remembered Joseph's name, even joked about bringing donuts if he ever swung by for a site visit. He was good at this, building rapport. Charming without being too obvious. Older than me by a decade, divorced with no kids. Always well-dressed, hair a little too neat, shoes that never had scuffs. The kind of man who could make you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room just by tilting his head. At first, I thought his friendliness was just good leadership. He supported my work. He said he respected boundaries. And when I mentioned once that I felt invisible in the chaos of motherhood, he told me, "You still have a voice, Claire. You just need to give yourself permission to use it." I let that sink in. I'd forgotten how powerful it felt to be seen. Not just as a mother. Not just as a wife. But as a whole woman. Still, there was a line. I was aware of it, aware of how I was always careful with my words, how I kept our conversations just professional enough to avoid suspicion, even in my own mind. Joseph knew Jared in passing. They'd met a few times when Jared came by to check on grant-funded building projects Joseph's crew was completing. They got along well enough, cordial, maybe even friendly. Jared had once sent a bottle of wine over after Joseph completed a particularly complicated project ahead of schedule. It sat unopened for weeks. When I invited Jared to Emma's first birthday party, it didn't feel strange. We were hosting something small, just family, a few friends, nothing too flashy. I sent the invite out of courtesy, not really expecting he'd come. But he RSVP'd the same day. Said he had a gift picked out already. For my favorite writer's daughter, he wrote. That morning was beautiful. September sun, warm breeze, the kind of day you want to bottle. Emma woke up early, babbling in her crib, and Joseph scooped her up in that sleepy, affectionate way that always made my heart swell. We baked cupcakes together. Well, I baked while Emma smeared batter on the counters and Joseph tried to keep her from grabbing the oven door. I wore a yellow sundress I hadn't worn in months. It was looser now, after pregnancy and the gradual erosion of time. Still, it made me feel good, pretty, put together. I added a little lipstick. I told myself it was for photos. Guests trickled in. My sister brought her twins, who promptly dismantled the stack of party favors I'd spent the night assembling. Joseph's mom hovered, offering unsolicited advice about balloon placement. Laughter swirled like music, mingling with the scent of grilled burgers and buttercream frosting. And then Jared arrived. He looked out of place in slacks and a collared shirt, but he carried himself like he belonged. He gave Emma a bright red wooden train set, crouched to her level, and made her giggle. He complimented my baking, said the backyard looked like something out of a catalogue. The door clicked softly behind me. I turned with the knife still in my hand, stupidly, as if I'd use it for anything other than slicing a toddler's birthday cake, and Jared was already inside, standing far too close. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was warm and dim, lit only by filtered sunlight bleeding through the curtains. I felt my heart flutter in that strange, primal way, fight or freeze. My mouth went dry. He smiled, but not the same easy grin he wore outside. This one was slow. Private. Possessive. Didn't want you to carry the cake alone, he said, voice low, eyes flicking down to my dress and then quickly back up to my face, as if he hadn't done it. I'm fine, I said, setting the knife down and straightening the plate. You always say that. I stiffened. I don't know what you mean. I mean you pretend like you've got it all together, Claire. But I see you. His voice dropped further, quieter, like he was sharing a secret. You don't have to wear the mask with me. A chill washed over me. I don't wear a mask, I replied, sharper than I intended. I'm hosting my daughter's birthday. You shouldn't be in here. There. I said it. A line drawn. But Jared didn't step back. He leaned against the door, arms crossed, casual in the most calculated way. I just think it's funny, he said. How quickly you shut people out when they get close. I felt heat rise in my chest, a mix of fear and fury. Close. You're my boss. That hasn't stopped you from sharing so much, he said. All those late-night edits, the personal emails. The way you look at me sometimes. I flinched like he'd slapped me. You're reading something that isn't there, I whispered. He pushed off the door and stepped closer. My hand instinctively went to the back of the table, gripping it for support. Tell me you've never thought about it, he said. Not even once. About what it might be like, if it was just you and me. And in that moment, something snapped inside me, not just from what he said, but from the realization that I had thought about it. Briefly. In passing. A moment of vulnerability on a sleepless night. An imagined kiss, a rush of forbidden attention. But never like this. Never with pressure. Never with fear. I stepped to the side, putting space between us. This is done, Jared. You're leaving. His face darkened, not with rage, but disappointment. He opened the door slowly, like he was doing me a favor, and walked out without another word. I stood there, the cake trembling in my hands, breathing like I'd run a marathon. I didn't move for almost a minute. /**. The rest of the party blurred. I handed out cake with a forced smile, laughter too high-pitched. Jared stayed for another 15 minutes, chatting politely with Joseph before excusing himself. No one noticed anything strange. No one saw how I avoided his eyes. No one asked why I looked like someone had knocked the wind out of me. That night, When I was tucking Emma into her crib, Joseph came up behind me and kissed my shoulder. "You did good today," he murmured. "She's happy." "Thanks," I said, brushing Emma's soft curls off her forehead. I couldn't meet his eyes. I didn't tell him. Not that night. Not for weeks. At first, I told myself I was protecting him. From embarrassment. From a confrontation. From doubt. But the truth was, I was protecting myself. Because somewhere deep inside, I wondered if I had invited it, if something I'd done had signaled to Jared that I was open to him. I replayed every email, every compliment, every time I'd laughed too long or smiled too wide. Was I complicit? Or just naive? /**. In the days that followed, I found myself shrinking. I didn't respond to Jared's emails. I turned down new assignments, citing family needs. He sent one more message, short, cryptic. "Hope you're not upset. Things got confusing. I'll back off." It made my stomach turn. I debated quitting entirely. But the mortgage, Emma's daycare, the rising bills, all of it whispered, not yet. I confided in my sister first. Over coffee, after Emma's nap time, when the house was quiet and my defenses were low. He came into the room and, it wasn't physical. Not really. But it was wrong. He wanted something. I could feel it. She leaned back in her chair, face unreadable. "Do you think Joseph knows?" I shook my head. "No. But I don't know how long I can pretend everything's fine." Her silence spoke volumes. /**. Then came the second twist. 3 weeks later, I was cleaning the kitchen when Joseph's phone buzzed. Normally, I wouldn't have looked. But the notification flashed with Jared's name. Curious, and suddenly tense, I opened it. "Did Claire tell you what happened?" I expected more from her. I froze. There was no context. Just that. But the implication was clear, he was trying to flip the story before I could. I confronted Joseph that night. "Did you see the message Jared sent you?" He nodded, slowly. "Yeah." I wasn't sure what it meant. I sat him down. Told him everything. From the party to the hallway to the message. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was even. "Did you lead him on?" The words stung worse than anything Jared had done. I stood up. "I'm telling you I was cornered. And you're asking that. I just need to understand what happened," he said, eyes wide with hurt. He made it sound like there was more to the story. I walked out. /**. The following week was a blur of cold silences and sidelong glances. I slept in Emma's room 2 nights in a row. Joseph apologized, sort of, but not for the question, just for how it came out. But something had shifted. Trust had cracked on all sides. I didn't trust Jared. I didn't trust my instincts. And I didn't know if I could trust my husband again, either, not when his first reaction was doubt. Emma, blissfully unaware, kept smiling. Kept crawling into my lap for stories. Kept reminding me that I had something pure left. One morning, she reached for the same red train Jared had given her. I stared at it for a long time before I gently took it from her hands and placed it in a box labeled *donate. Because some gifts aren't gifts. They're weapons dressed in ribbon. And some men aren't men. They're mirrors, showing you everything you didn't want to see about your life, your choices, and the fragile structures you built your trust upon. And suddenly, everything I thought was solid began to feel like it was made of sand. It happened a month after the party, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. Emma was napping. The house was quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards settling in the afternoon sun. I was folding laundry when Joseph came home early. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said. I swallowed hard. My first instinct was to brace. I'd spent the past few weeks tiptoeing around the crater that had formed between us, hoping it would shrink on its own. But it hadn't. It had only grown wider, deeper, colder. He sat at the edge of the bed, eyes cast down. "I saw Jared today." My stomach dropped. What? He was at the supply warehouse downtown, Joseph said, rubbing the back of his neck. He saw me. Came right up to me like nothing had happened. I stayed silent, folding Emma's honesty with trembling hands. Joseph's voice lowered. I asked him straight up, what happened at the party? What he meant in that message. I turned slowly to face him. And? He smiled. Like he was amused, Joseph said. He said, Claire's not as innocent as she wants to be seen. She's complicated. Then he just walked off. I blinked. Complicated. Joseph nodded, still looking stunned. Like you were some kind of secret. The word stung. You believe him? No, he said quickly. Not now. But I think I wanted to, at first. Because it made things easier. Easier. If it was you who blurred the line, then I didn't have to see how badly I failed. That I didn't notice what was happening right in front of me. His words landed hard. I sat beside him, the space between us a gulf of doubt and pain. For weeks, he continued, I've been angry. At him. At you. At myself. I kept replaying the party, thinking, how could I not know? How could I miss that something was wrong? Because I didn't say anything, I whispered. He looked at me then, really looked. Why didn't you? I hesitated. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it real. Because I didn't want to break what was left of the good things, I said. I thought maybe if I buried it deep enough, we could pretend it never happened. I thought I could protect you, and us. He nodded slowly. But instead, it broke everything anyway. We sat in silence, the weight of unspoken fears pressing between us. Then Joseph said, You know what scared me the most? I shook my head. That maybe I stopped being someone you could trust. That maybe you felt safer keeping secrets than telling me. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't think you'd believe me. And that was the truth. He reached out then, gently, taking my hand in his. I didn't believe you at first. And I'm sorry for that. I let my pride get in the way of seeing how scared you were. How cornered. I didn't respond right away. I was too busy trying to keep from falling apart. I just kept thinking. I finally said, what if I had smiled wrong? Laughed too hard at a joke. Did I give him the wrong idea? Did I? Stop, Joseph interrupted, squeezing my hand. Don't go down that road. You didn't invite what he did. He twisted the kindness you showed him. That's on him. Not you. I broke then. I didn't mean to, but I cried. Deep, guttural sobs that rose from a place I hadn't touched in weeks. Joseph pulled me in, held me the way he did when I gave birth to Emma, like I was something fragile and powerful all at once. It wasn't forgiveness in a grand, cinematic moment. It wasn't some neat conclusion. But it was something. A beginning. A place to start from again. ****. Later that evening, Joseph made us tea while I sat by Emma's crib, watching her sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell, her lips slightly parted in peaceful dreams. And I thought about the word Jared had used. *complicated. I'd hated it at first. But sitting there, in the soft glow of the nightlight, I realized, maybe it wasn't an insult. Maybe it was true. Because I am complicated. I'm a mother, yes, but also a woman who sometimes misses the simplicity of being seen for who I am, not what I do. I'm someone who wants to be needed, desired, validated, but also safe. I'm someone who once believed all betrayals came with bruises or shouts or hotel receipts. I never imagined one could come in the shape of a quiet door closing behind you. But it did. And it changed me. ****. 3 days later, I sent Jared my resignation. No explanation. No fanfare. Just a line, effective immediately. He didn't respond. A week after that, I blocked his number, his email. Deleted the old threads. Erased the shared documents. Removed the pieces of myself that had lived in that false reflection he'd cast. But the scar remained, not visible, but real. Joseph and I started therapy. At first, it was awkward. Stilted. But we kept showing up. And slowly, something softened between us. One session, our therapist asked, "What do you want to rebuild together?" Joseph said, "A space where she doesn't feel like she has to carry it alone." And for the first time in weeks, I believed him. /**. The truth, the big, messy, painful truth, is this. Sometimes betrayal isn't a scream in the night. It's a whisper in the hallway. A compliment with a hook. A hand that hovers too long on your back. And the deepest wounds aren't always the loudest. But if you face them, if you name them, you can begin to heal. Not because the pain disappears, but because you finally see yourself clearly. And you realize, you are not what happened to you. You are what you choose next. It's been 9 months since that day. 9 months since the door clicked shut behind me, and everything I thought I knew about trust and safety and the boundaries we keep was upended by a single look, a single silence that screamed. In that time, life has crept forward, in the way that it always does. Emma is walking now, toddling around the house like a pint-sized explorer, bumping into walls, laughing at nothing, reminding me that joy is often simple and loud. She doesn't remember the party. She doesn't know what happened in that back room. And I'm grateful for that, for the gift of her unknowing. Joseph and I are not the same. That's the truth I've had to make peace with. But we are something new now, something rawer, more aware. We talk more, even when the words are uncomfortable. Especially then. There are still hard days, moments when we trip over the debris of what was broken. But we get up. We try again. I won't lie. There are times I wonder how differently things might have gone if I hadn't invited Jared. Or if I hadn't let myself enjoy the attention, just a little. That thought shames me, though I know it shouldn't. It's a trap women fall into often, this idea that being noticed, being admired, somehow makes us responsible for what others take from us. But I've learned something since then. Being seen is not the same as being safe. And I'm allowed to want to be both. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet, I think about how close I came to not telling anyone. To burying the moment and folding it into the background noise of my life, pretending it was small, meaningless. But it wasn't. It shaped something in me. It made me look at the way women like me walk through the world, always alert, always performing a kind of emotional math. Smile, but not too much. Be polite, but firm. Be clear, but soft. Be desirable, but untouchable. It's exhausting. And it's invisible until it's not. One afternoon, while cleaning out my email inbox, I found an old draft I'd written for Jared's organization. An article on childhood emotional safety. I hadn't submitted it. I almost deleted it. But then I read the opening line. Children learn who they are based on how the world responds to their needs. They carry those responses into every room they walk into as adults. It stunned me. Because somewhere, deep inside, I think that's what I was confronting in that moment in the guest room. Not just Jared's violation, but the years of being taught to make myself small, agreeable, unthreatening. To doubt myself. To question my worth unless it was being validated by someone else. I decided not to delete the piece. I finished it. Not for Jared. For myself. I submitted it to a different publication, under my full name. It was accepted last month. I framed the email. /**. A few weeks ago, I took Emma to a park. She was wearing her yellow rain boots even though the sky was clear, insisting they made her run faster. I watched her sprint through the grass, hair tangled with wind, her laugh echoing through the air. I sat on the bench alone, sipping lukewarm coffee, and I felt something strange and unfamiliar settle into my chest. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing you've walked through fire and come out changed, and still, somehow, whole. Jared still exists, somewhere. Still shows up in grant articles and non-profit newsletters. Still shakes hands and probably tells himself stories that make him feel better. But he doesn't live in my mind anymore. I no longer jump at shadows shaped like him. I no longer reframe the story to make it more palatable. What happened was real. And it was wrong. And I told the truth. That's all I can do. That's all any of us can do. I don't know what the future holds for Joseph and me. Some days, the closeness is back. Other days, there's a quiet distance we haven't quite bridged. But we're trying. There's a tenderness in trying that we never had before. And maybe that's the point. Maybe healing isn't about going back to what was. Maybe it's about learning how to live differently with what's left. ****. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Not all betrayals are loud. Sometimes they sneak in wearing a smile and carrying a gift. But you'll know them by how they make you feel small when you were meant to feel safe. And when that happens, when the line is crossed and your voice feels stolen, remember, you can still choose what comes next. Even in the silence, you can speak. Even in the dark, you can turn on the light. And even when trust is shattered, you can rebuild something stronger than before. You.